back. We had a good week. I'm here with my good friend Stephen Ray, that my partner doing the Stories in the Room series that's going to be coming out pretty soon. It looks like we're zeroing in on a date, and my son Dante is moderating today, as he did last week, and answering questions. He's a music producer and songwriter. You could look for him too, and he's here helping us out. So whenever you're ready with any questions, what were you thinking, Stephen? Let's focus it a little bit differently, because we had a lot of technical questions last time, and I'm really happy to do that again. But maybe since we have Stephen, we could get into some other things too.
Yeah, just a number of any questions you have regarding the process, or what was going on in terms of the dialogue between musicians and in the room. Any questions around the creation of the songs, we both can speak to that, and the fun we had.
Does anybody have any questions they want to start off with in the chat? Everyone's kind of just still joining right now, so maybe give them a second.
What struck you? Like you mentioned to me, before we were going to sit down and do this, there was a feeling that you got from the songs, right? Or was it from the songs or from the process of the songs? Probably from the songs.
It was from the songs, and but also during the process, you could tell, we could tell just how it moved us one way or another. Having the players come in, having all the musicians come in and their vibe and their energy, and they were all so up and positive, and it just, hey man, how's it going? And how was your day? And and they're bringing energy from another session, right? So then right. people forget in those days, they come in and do a session, and then they be there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, then they leave, go to another session. Sometimes come back later, because they were already booked, or
Well, my guess is whatever session they were on, when they got to this session and heard the songs on this session,
yes,
they didn't hear anything like that before.
Yeah, no, it was a very special. The energy in the room was always the magic of it, of everything.
It really maintained.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, you were there from start to finish.
Yeah.
I came in and out.
I mean, during the whole process, I mean, I always say there's no mistake that Quincy's middle name is Delight, and I think that everything in the room was the delight. The energy that he brought, and that Michael brought.
It's a hard thing with all the pressure too, though. They had a lot of pressure. They had a hit album they were coming off of.
Yep.
And making sure that their intuition was right. Did they pick the right songs? Because there were a lot of songs in the process.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting, that no one felt they didn't exude that they were under pressure. Everyone was just having a good time, and focusing on the task at hand, which is what is the best Lindrum sound, what is the best all the things that they were bouncing off of going through the arrangements.
Maybe you can segue off this question. Landon Lambo asks, how much creativity was allowed on the songs? Was there any room to improv?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think there would be. I mean, Rod, though, on the songs that he wrote, was so accurate, right? He knew what he wanted. And then there was Quincy always wanted the personality of the musician.
Yeah.
So it's like, think of it in stages. Like, there was the songwriting, and the song was pretty set because it had been worked on, and they really dialed it in over a long time. Then you get to the next level, the arrangement, the parts.
Right.
And those were all because Quincy was an arranger too, and so they really knew what the arrangement was going to be. But then, you did a thing, they for sure were looking for your personality on it.
Yeah.
And then things happen. I mean, you saw a lot.
Yeah, a lot of that happened because of, for example, with a number of the musicians, any number of them, but especially some of the memories that we talk about is, Paul Jackson's interpretation of a line that, that Michael may have sung to him, or Rod may have put on the demo, but it wasn't quite. There's nuances of personality that really brought out what you hear on the record. Greg Fillingane's, Anthony's right, there were parts that Rod had. He came very well organized and structured, but then they would put their, they would put their jelly on it, as Quincy would say. You know, they would put their magic on it. You know, and the nuance of that you hear. You know, we know because we heard the demos, so we know what they did. You know, but you guys, you feel it.
Yeah, and I remember Paul always saying that Quincy would just keep saying, "Try something."
Right. Right.
Try another thing.
Yeah.
Try it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so they'd listen to it, and you know, we've said this before, but you'd try a lot of things, and then if there was another guitar player that was in there, there would come to a point where they might have to erase something too, because we didn't have endless tracks.
Right.
So they kind of made decisions. So that's kind of improvising along the way too.
Yeah.
You know, making your decisions, and because with improvising, like, that's it. You know, it happened live, and then you have to live with it, and they did it, but a lot of spontaneity there too.
Yeah, you know, it's just it's casting, and Quincy was the master of knowing who to cast to play on what song, this drummer versus this drummer, this bass player versus, you know, and not really verses, but no, I think he's the right vibe for this, and his instincts are going to be this, and we think those instincts, we being Quincy, Michael, Rod, and Bruce, those instincts are going to be right. I mean, hiring Anthony, they knew that, you know, what you were doing and what you had done previously before you got in the room was going to be enhance the project in a major way, because their vision was a more cinematic vision, and you understood those landscapes.
It still blows me away.
And you were so young. We were
young.
We were actually, him, Michael, and I were the youngest in the room. So
We were the youngest.
Yeah.
But you know, you remember the story of Ndugu, right? How when it came to Billie Jean, like,
Yeah.
what were they going to do? A drum machine? Because the demo was on drum machine.
Yeah.
And then why, you know?
Well, you know, Quincy said he wanted a different hump on it. You know, he wanted, there was a backbeat, I mean, that a drum machine obviously just can't give you. The soul of that, the stiffness of that. But Ndugu came in with that foot, the hat, the snare, the foot, the hat, the snare, and you feel that, you know, and that's what's so. I mean, God bless him. Leon Ndugu Chancellor was a brilliant, brilliant drummer before he entered the room. But when he put that down, we were all just, I remember so many times driving home at night, driving Quincy back home, we would just blast Billie Jean, just as the track, long before vocal, and we'd just be smiling.
Right, because the demo was drum machine.
Right, the demo was drum machine.
And they made a decision, and,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you can't imagine it another way.
yeah, no, exactly, yeah.
All right, AB Zipper asks, do you have a funny story during the recording of Thriller? And then it's kind of a two-parter. What's your favorite synth of all time? And then what do you think Michael's favorite synth is?
Okay, favorite synth of all time, ARP 2600, because it was my first one. But I really think I can match any synth. I mean, I can do anything on it because of the way it's designed. And we can get more into that, but you've got vertical this way for modulation, and horizontal for signal flow, and it's very visual, and it has all the basic tools to do kind of whatever you want to do. So I really like it, and you can bring other things into it. Michael's favorite synth of all time, I have no idea. I know that he liked, you know, Prince and Morris Day in the time, because that's what he kept playing on the record player. So, you know, Mini Moogs, Oberheim, I guess those guys used like the Oberheim, I don't know what was out by then, probably just OBX.
Yeah.
You know, those are the types of sounds that I was hearing that he really liked. You know, he had an LM1 drum machine. Probably really liked Mini Moog because that was on a lot of stuff.
Well, I was just gonna say if I had to say what his favorite would be, Mini Moog.
Okay.
Because of his years before, with Motown, you know, hanging with Stevie Wonder in the studio, and literally, you know, there's photos of him looking over Stevie Wonder's shoulder. He would, anytime he had off when he wasn't touring, he would be in the studio with Stevie as much as possible, learning and watching Stevie Wonder go through his process. And Moog, if you remember those Stevie Wonder records, played a huge.
It did, but a lot of people don't know that like Stevie played a lot of famous bass sounds on the 2600.
On the 2600,
and Shake
right.
Your Body too.
Right.
That's 2600.
That's 2600. That's not Moog. You're right.
So okay,
Yeah.
so there's a little bit there, and
Yeah.
now the funny stories. I mean, I don't know. You're gonna have to pick one because you.
Oh boy, man, funny stories. Oh boy.
I mean, there's like
there's so many.
but like Beverly Center. There's when he got stuck on the freeway.
Yeah. Well, a funny story. Yeah. So in those days, you had multi-tracks. And when the two machines when they would lock up, you'd have to recalibrate, and you would be down for 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. So Michael would get restless, and one day he said, "Hey man, let's get out of here." And I was like, "What do you mean, let's get out of here?" And he said, "Let's go to the Beverly Center. I want to go to the toy store." And I said, "Okay," but immediately in my thinking, I'm kind of panicking because I'm like, we just can't walk to the Beverly Center with you. So we go out back where his car was parked in the back, and in the trunk of his car, you had a big box with all these, disguises, beard and thick eyebrows and a hat. And so he puts that on, and he goes, "Come on, do it with me." I was like, "Nobody cares about me." He goes, "No, come on, let's have some fun." So we do. We put it on, and we go to the Beverly Center. We don't drive. We walked, and which is another really funny thing. But I think he really enjoyed that because he could get out and see the world and not have, he could see it just as a normal person. And we go to the toy store. We're leaving the Beverly Center. We're coming down on the escalator, and we're thinking we're okay. We get down to like the second floor, and these girls come on, and then they get off on the bottom floor, and some girl says something to the effect of, actually, we were with Nelson.
Okay.
I remember Nelson was, if I remember correctly, Nelson Hayes.
So you had a little support.
Yeah, and this one girl goes, "Oh, look at him, he's trying to dress like Michael Jackson." And we were like, so we walk slowly away, and some girl yells from somewhere else, "Where's Michael Jackson?" And all of a sudden it becomes, through the mall, you hear these girls screaming, and because what happened is she saw he had on the black loafers and the white socks, and that's what gave her the clue that, oh, this guy's trying to act like Michael Jackson. And we end up running out of the Beverly Center. We get lucky and we catch the light at La Cienega, and we run across the light, run through the alley, and they track us down, and we're laughing the whole way. We're like really giggling. You remember Smelly? Smelly is what we call Michael. The nickname Quincy gave him. And remember, he get that laugh. He would giggle,
yeah. Especially doing pranks.
Right. Especially doing pranks. And anyway, they tracked us down to the studio. He ends up having them. He signs a autograph photo for the women, and we tell them, the studio manager, Sherry, I think it was at the time, says, "Hey, okay, we're going to do this, but don't you come back here." And we always, years later, you and I talk about this, and Quincy and I talked about, thank God there was no social media back then.
That's a good point.
The ironic things of us doing this.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, paparazzi and TMZ and all that, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did.
And this was just filling in because the multi-tracks weren't locking. Because to get more than 24 tracks, they used multiple 24-track machines and got them all to lock. But it was not always like on the mark, it would go down every once in a while.
Right.
And so we were filling in time, and that's these guys chose to be bad.
yeah, we chose to. Yeah.
So the Battalion Stallion asks, did you ever feel like you didn't have the technology to execute an idea that was presented? Did you ever reach the technological limit at the time? By the way, I love your stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Because it kind of ties into that.
I don't know if we thought. I mean, they were pushing the technological limit, so we kind of knew that it wouldn't be fair to ask for anything beyond that, because we were all there at the edge. We were just it is a good segue. It's an interesting question. The machines didn't always lock, but when they did, then there could be 96 tracks available, which was beyond what anyone else was doing. You know?
Why would they not lock if they would work sometimes and not other times?
It was just it's machines, and it was a technology that was kind of new.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I could give you the technical reason. Maybe the power, it had to be perfect, you know, at 60 hertz coming out of the wall or something.
For them to run at the same speed.
Exactly.
And,
Possibly.
Yeah, and they would offset, and and when that happened, it was like, I remember the tooth,
Yeah.
you know, the Ampex tape machine,
Yeah.
like, and you're like, oh boy.
And it was a critical thing where they had to run right at speed.
Right.
Because if they didn't, and then you put a part down, and then let's say then like 10 minutes later, they actually are at speed, now your part is out of tune.
yeah, it's warped.
It's going to be either sharp or flat. And it's not like Pro Tools or something where you can just, you have the performance of the player, and you can't really change it. And then we also did things that were pushing the limit, like flying things in.
Yes.
And it was all manual. Like they would just record something on one machine and then just hit play and hope that it would come in and record it on the other machine.
Right.
And so you'd try it like a bunch of times, and then you'd get it.
Like do passes until until you found the
So
sync.
It was very like pushing the limit, but in a manual kind of analog way, pushing technology,
That's cool.
making it. It was exciting, and so all ideas were on the table, I would say,
Yeah, they were.
and they were willing to try it. So it's like we already were there, and if it didn't happen, you know, you weren't hung for it. You know, it was just like. That was a cool idea.
Yeah.
But I think most of the time they'd figure out a way. There's such a wonderful group of people there with Matt Forger and Bruce, the guru, you know, and Quincy just allowing for it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Anthony having a very strong understanding of the parameters of the gear, like what the gear, you know, could do, and you know, others in the room like that, you know, with David Page and Steve Picaro and Michael Boddicker. When you have guys that really understand gear and know how it works, Quincy, he trusted. There was a lot of, that's the one thing we talk about, is that there was so much trust given to Anthony. They trusted him. Like, so if, to your answer your question, if there was something that they were trying to come up with a sound that they remember that you couldn't, that, oh, Quincy'd say, oh, well, can't we try, can you do a kind of thing like that? And then you, knowing the gear, would go, oh, yeah, well, maybe we could try this and try that and try this. And there was no judgment. It was just total trust.
Yeah.
Like, hey, let's give Anthony the time he needs to do this
Yeah.
and figure it out.
That's why it's hard to believe, you know, that it all happened still, even after all this time.
Yeah.
We were syncing Lindrums and those things were relying, they were counting that the feel was going to be there because they were coming off the wall. That was John Robinson.
Right, exactly.
So, you know,
JR doing his thing.
and
man.
all that
Yeah.
that kind of music was like, you know, a person. And so there was a lot of trust there that we could sync it with a Dr. Click, put a click on these two multi-tracks that hopefully are at speed, right? Because that's feel.
Right.
Yeah.
And then fire that, and then that's going to fire the drum machine. And then every time we do a pass, they would play to it. And like a lot of trust that it was like, I'm sitting there like, I didn't think about it then, but like replacing the drummer, which was
Right.
for that kind of music, how essential does it get?
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah.
beyond a drummer.
Yeah, exactly. As like on Want to Be Starting Something, for example, there's no drummer. That's programmed.
And Thriller, there's no drummer.
In Thriller, there's no drummer. You know, I mean, Polino, you know, DaCosta, you know, on percussion, but there's no
The
drummer.
core feel, and P.Y.T. is this Lindrum,
Exactly.
and it was recorded with the players. It was a fresh pass of drums. I mean, I don't remember doing that, and we don't even do that now. You know, you lay the drums down and you get it right, and everybody plays to it. You don't usually do a fresh drum pass every time you cut the track, and expect that they're all going to be like kind of matching.
Yeah.
Somebody asked earlier how long the session days were and what, like, how long did the time period cover too?
That's funny.
Just enough. Go ahead.
No, you.
Well, just because we interviewed Matt, and Matt, his answer, like, because we knew that Matt was the one that was there longer than anybody, because
He was there first and last.
we could never be there and not see him,
Right.
right?
Literally, we walk in the
Yeah.
morning, he's there.
Wow.
Yeah, so we
An
asked
hour
him.
before we got there. Right.
So he said, well, I was just practicing the art of how little sleep I could get and still be know what's going on, and so he said he got
That's a
it down
great
to
answer.
4 hours. That's what he said.
He did,
You'll hear
yeah.
it in one of the episodes.
Yeah.
He got it down to 4 hours.
4 hours. That's
Wow.
what you know, so I think we never got out of there. I never left there with Quincy rarely before midnight. Rarely.
Yeah, and they were up. Like,
And
did
we
Quincy go to yoga or?
Yeah, we get up in the morning, go to yoga, he'd go to yoga, and we would start almost every day at 10. So from 10 to 12, 10 to 1, 10 to 2, 10 to 1:30, 10 to,
And
sometimes 9:30 to, depending on other things. Because you have to remember, this wasn't the only thing that Quincy had going on,
Right.
or that Michael had going on. So
There was the E.T. storybook album
and then you throw that in
at the same time.
at the same time when Stephen came to Quincy and Michael.
Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg initially asking for just a song, but then coming back and wanting a whole narration of the film, which in the middle of working on an album that Epic Records, CBS Records is waiting for their billing.
Didn't he do most of his? Did Michael do most of his vocals that night?
Yeah, he did all his vocals in there.
All. That's my understanding.
Yeah,
And
almost
then
all
it
of
was
it.
like production all day long.
Yeah,
And
yeah, because he's the famous the great vocal teacher Seth Riggs was always when your body is sort of aligned more after after it's gone through the process of walking, standing, your throat is Stevie Wonder never did a vocal before the afternoon.
I never knew. I learned something all
Yeah.
the time. I never heard that before.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
What was the setup like when Michael would go to record vocals? Would there be other musicians present, or was it very...
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, mostly at night. The only people that were there.
Was he particular about it, or not very?
No. I would come sit next to him sometimes out in the room. But other than that, it was just at night. It was normally just Rod Timberton, Bruce Swedeen, of course, Quincy, Matt, and myself. And unless there was, someone else that was there that happened to just hang out after they were already done with their part, at like 5, 6, right? But mostly at night, it was just us.
Vocal
quiet.
Yeah,
It was
quiet.
definitely quieter. Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know exactly what this means, but someone's asking, did Quincy push the alpha state with you guys as well? Did he give everyone the leave the ego at the door speech too?
He didn't have to. He didn't have to. That idea that they made a bigger deal about that when we did We Are the World, that there was actually a sign. But no, it was just a conversation.
Because it was all the big superstars.
Yeah.
Because it needed to be.
Yeah, and it wasn't really a sign. Somebody wrote down something like that, but it was just a conversation that everyone knew. This is Quincy Jones. Okay, he's a loving, gracious, wonderful human being. I, in my own years with him, I never saw anyone come with any of that at all, because they knew that just wasn't. That just wouldn't be.
It's not the place for that.
It wouldn't, and they knew that. No matter how famous they were, they just, there's something about him that you just know that whether you're the person cleaning the kitchen, or you're a movie star, Quincy treated everyone exactly the same. Exactly. So those kind of things were not tolerated, and the musicians, like I said, there was a lot of trust, and Anthony and I, look, we were like, we were in our early 20s, and we were thinking, wow, first of all, we're here.
Definitely.
So,
and to get the greeting, like the first day I walked in, I got hugged, and like Steven said, you're just like, you're there and you get to be treated like a family member. Like,
everybody hugged every morning.
I never had that happen.
Everybody, you come in the studio and that's that was made me think of one of the funny story, another funny story, but we won't go into that.
But how do you win? How do you think you're going to win the pissing contest of We Are the World? What superstar in there is going to win against anybody else? It's like you'd have to be off your rocker.
I mean, the hardest thing about that was so many people wanted to be a part of We Are the World. Famous singers, well renowned around the world. But the goal was to make money for Africa, for U.S. for Africa. So that's the goal. how you get there, like with anything else, whether it's a car or a song, it has to be well made, right?
Yeah.
So a wonderful song, a hit song that's engaging and loving, that reflects what that was, along with the most popular artist at that time. And that's a very hard thing to navigate. I mean, Quincy, everybody loves Quincy. Quincy loves everyone else. But you have to, I saw him go through that process, and it was, it was perfect that Lionel and Michael wrote that great song. And A&M was the perfect studio. Having it the night of the American Music Awards, when everyone's in town. So from a budget standpoint, you're not having to fly people in from all over the world.
Yeah.
It was perfect, so.
And to answer your question, like, it didn't happen on Thriller. Thriller was just like a perfect convergence where not a lot had to be said, in terms of that high level part of it.
Yeah.
We all just felt it. It went from the top down, from Quincy and Michael.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, what's the Pharrell song, "Cause I'm Happy"? I mean, we were all happy, really. I mean, not to sound corny, but that's just the fact of what it was.
And it was a place where Michael was, too, because he was happy to be finally expressing his own voice after being Motown and then the Jacksons, and then his first solo album was a lot of outside influence in terms of the material, and then he really got to dig into his voice, right, and his material on Thriller.
He did. And,
so he brought a joy coming in. It was like his first time to do it.
Yeah.
So it was an innocence, and you can't repeat that even when you do your second album.
No, you can't. Yeah, I mean, and he was his humanity was evolving. I mean, there's things, like you said, there are things he wanted to express that he didn't express on Off the Wall.
It's interesting. So you think his drive was at a different place, maybe too, for Thriller?
It was never. You can't match it. The first time you do it's. The things in life you only do once. You can repeat them, but it's not the same. There's only one once.
Yeah, he was so brilliant and so focused, and the hardest working artist that I've ever been around. I mean, we talk about that. I mean, he was focused and working on his craft all the time.
And a lot of facets. Like a lot of us are just struggling to focus on music, but he was focusing on a lot of big picture stuff, and then dancing.
Yes.
Like that, you're so out of breath from that. I mean, and then singing at that level, and the vocal arrangements, because he kind of practiced all. That's my understanding that I've heard from everybody. He knew every part he was going to sing ahead of time. Ahead
of time, and he would dance every day. He would take a break of at least a half an hour and go into the lobby and dance. And because he was in a safe environment. We didn't let, in terms of outside people coming in, it was the session players. Other than that, outside, we kept it because he felt safe to do that. And to Anthony's point, when he did his vocals, he was moving. I mean, remember Bruce had to put the certain gear around so that it would pick up on the mic, but
well, yeah, because there was a lot of outside sound, and Bruce would just go for it. But I just think that dancing that he was doing all day long was just always in the atmosphere of all the everything was about that. Because when he'd come in the room and he'd be doing something, he just came off of either he's going to be dancing or he was dancing, and you had to kind of connect with that vibe, or whatever you were doing wasn't going to make him like get off as much, and then you knew I better redirect. I felt that, because sometimes he'd be right next to you, and you start seeing him move, and then it's like, this guy's right next to you moving to what you're doing. So, that's next level, but he was always in tune with that. He knew the importance, like dancers know the importance that it's either danceable music or it isn't. And so he was like, always never letting that get out of off the page, it was in front of everybody.
I'll never hear... I don't think personally. I'll never hear a vocalist perform the way he performed, whether it was a ballad or especially on an up tempo. I mean, rhythmically, he was literally a rhythmic machine.
Wow.
I mean, it was in him constantly.
I mean, that's to say, machine.
Yeah.
Dev K Jams asks, "Is it true that Thriller was recorded in only 6 to 8 weeks?"
I would say no. 6 to 8 weeks, and then let me think now.
It was recreated too.
Yeah,
so it's
I was
an
going to say.
unfair
Yeah, you can't really.
comparison.
No, you can't because there was you got to remember each time a single came out, there was a different mix for it, and Bruce had to do edits, and so we were constantly back in the studio.
But
in terms of the original album, no,
it was months.
It was months.
But it was recreated from years.
Yeah.
Of demos.
I think it was a total of.
Interesting.
I think because of the E.T. Storybook album and having to do that as well, I think it was about 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
It was 4 months.
But of like recreating demos that were already nailed.
Right.
And then trying to make them
Demos
better.
from like Steve and Rod and like
and Michael.
Yeah, and Michael.
Demos that they had done in different places.
At Michael's house, the demos,
I thought this was an interesting question.
There's one quick thing to say. There's
Yeah.
always an anomaly. I mean, there can be, not always, but P.Y.T. went down in no time.
Yeah,
That went down in like a week and a half.
P.Y.T. was definitely the fastest in terms of something being written while we were recording.
Oh yeah, conceived.
I mean, it happened. That's a story.
It's a whole story.
It's a whole other story.
It did go down
how that happened.
In what, 2 weeks max, from start to finish.
Yeah, Quincy called James late at night. We were driving home, and he got the idea.
This is a me question, but
Yeah, okay,
would
go ahead.
would you guys have a focus of the day or like a goal of the day where it was like you would spend this like day on Thriller and then in 2 weeks you start working on the next song? That's kind of how
There
it
were
worked.
2 studios. There's A and B.
There's A and B.
There's A and B.
Are they both working on different projects?
No,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
songs.
It's different songs for
Different
Thriller.
songs.
Yeah.
Different songs. Same project, different songs.
Yeah.
Until E.T. Storybook,
Right.
then
it was really
then it was
crazy.
like
Different
2 projects,
Gotcha.
3 different rooms because Jeff Picard
All during Thriller.
all doing Thriller.
Gotcha.
Jeff Picard did drums at Sunset Sound
Yeah.
for Beat It,
Oh wow.
while we were in 2 different rooms in Westlake.
And you guys would just run the tapes over to Westlake from
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might
from
have.
Sunset.
I did. Yeah.
You did. You had the tapes in your
He
car.
was everywhere.
Wow.
He was with Michael. He was with Quincy. He was with the musicians. He was everywhere.
Yeah, that
Matt was always at Westlake,
Mm-hmm.
but Stephen was always everywhere. Keeping the hand because
I had to go.
he was taking notes. He knew everything that Quincy had in his. As soon as it was in
Mm-hmm.
Quincy's head, it went through him,
Yeah.
and then it was activated. And then
Well, that was the beauty of it. Quincy would share
Mm-hmm.
his thoughts. He would talk out loud in the car, or we were.
So
it
like
was
P.Y.T. getting created though in that time span, like was the idea pitched or did someone bring it in as a song?
I'll tell you the story. We were coming home one night late, probably about midnight, 12:30, and we were literally, like I was saying, we were on the. Well, I spoke to this already. This will be in the documentary coming out. That we are at Cannon and Santa Monica, right near the Annenberg now. That used to be the Beverly Hills Post Office then, and this Ferrari pulls up next to us with these 2 very attractive women, young women, and we had the windows down and we were blasting, and I remember what song we were playing, and Quincy looked over because he was always up in the front seat with me, and he looked down and he looked over at me and said, "Man, those some P.Y.T. some pretty young things there." And the girl looked up and she said, "Hey, what are you guys doing tonight? Where are you going?" And he was like, "Oh, baby, I'm going home." And he's like, "Where are you going?" They're like, "Oh, we're going to a party, and up in Bel Air." So immediately in my head, security thinking, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to let them go first before and follow them because they're actually going to a party. Actually, the party they ended up going to was on Quincy Street.
Oh wow.
Which was another really weird thing. But he gets to the house and he says to me, he goes, "I know just the guy to write this. I said, "That's a great title. That's a really great title." And he said, "I know just the guy to write this song." And he called James Ingerman like almost 1 a.m. or something. I said, "James, I got this title."
Also, Quincy kind of like had the whole.
Well, they were looking for party songs still because they had gone through so many songs and they still felt like if we could find one, right, we could use something like an up-tempo party song. So it was just like one of those circumstantial things. They were there. There's a little bit more to that story, about how it all wrapped around and the name came and then they thought, "Whoa, this could be a song title." We have a more in-depth version of that.
Right,
I'd be
exactly.
interested to hear, but
Yeah.
that's how it turned around. And then what I was telling you earlier about playing drums on a session, that was like days or a week later. James had the whole song and he sang it to me and said, I want this beat. And he was just going like, boom, 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 like singing the kick patterns. And we programmed it all in the hallway. And then the next day, the band was there. And
In the hallway. Between A and B.
Drums in the hallway.
Here, out
Because the rooms were all full.
Yeah.
And Quincy said, just go down there and work with James. Like, put some headphones on or whatever. So Matt hooked us up.
It happens today. It's
We
not
literally
that.
did it in the hallway. And then they played to it, though. Like, I was in the rhythm section date with these crazy musicians. And then I'm, like, programming a drum machine live. You know, that was pretty out there. But then the song, like, it was... They tracked it and did the vocals, right?
Yeah. I one of the things I still wish that I had that I could find, or if Quincy has, is the demo of James singing P.Y.T, which was unbelievable.
Really cool.
And
Well, so much. What did Michael say?
so much so that the only time I think I felt Michael I ever saw him possibly be intimidated was when he came to Quincy. Quincy, I can't sing that song like James.
Wow.
And Quincy said, "You don't have to. You do your thing. You put your thing on it. You do your thing." And that's what he did. And what I hear every time I hear the song is him mimicking James.
It's really... That's
Because he kept saying James is singing.
He's singing that song.
That version's nowhere, right? That version, it's nowhere. It's not on the internet.
somewhere.
It's
somewhere. Yeah.
It's somewhere.
It's somewhere.
If anyone has it, it would be Quincy on a cassette. But other than that, because it was never on anything other than a cassette.
Somebody asked earlier, AB Zipper asked, is it true that Michael played the CS80 on Billie Jean? Did Michael play anything on any other song?
I can't touch that one, man. I don't know. I didn't play the CS80 on that.
Yeah, I don't
know who did.
I don't remember that.
I mean, the guy that played, that's safe to say played everything, is Greg Fillinganes.
Yeah.
That's my go-to
Yeah.
for anything.
Yeah.
And until I know that somebody else played something else, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I can't.
Would you say that?
Yeah, I can't see. I don't remember that at all, and I was there like all the time. But I don't remember that. I think it would be Greg. If anybody played it on Billie Jean, it would have been Greg.
Probably
Greg
not
played
Michael.
The bass line, because I was involved in the bass line. It's Synclavier doubling Louis Johnson.
Right.
So that's how the bass line went down, and Greg and I recreated that on one of our videos. So you'll see that.
The great Louis Johnson.
I just don't remember. Oh yeah. Well,
Man, the great
how
Louis
could we have
Johnson.
lost all these people?
Yeah, the great Louis Johnson from the Brothers Johnson, and from my old neighborhood. And it would have to have been Greg. Yeah.
It could have been. I mean, I've heard people say they thought it was Michael, but
Yeah.
that does that.
I can't. I didn't see it.
But would he have done it? Is that conceivable that he would have? You got Indugo, the bass, the whole thing going down, and then he does that with that. I didn't see him do anything like that on the album.
I didn't either. So I can't really speak to it. I can't speak to that.
So we can't confirm or deny it.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
Gotta go legal.
I mean, I guess.
I'm really
I
sorry.
guess Quincy would be the only one to answer.
Not confirmed or denied.
Or Matt Forger. I mean,
Maybe Matt.
Matt
Yeah,
may know.
We
Yeah.
should try to dig it
Yeah,
up.
we should ask. Yeah, we should ask that.
We'll
Yeah.
try to dig it up.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find somebody that hasn't said a lot of questions yet. Because what song used the most tracks? Do you know? I mean, I'm sure they all used a ton.
Probably Thriller.
Probably Thriller.
It would be
Yeah.
Thriller. Yeah.
Probably because that
It
has
would
sound effects and dialogue and
It would be Thriller.
a lot of arrangement.
Yeah, either that or Want to Be Starting Something because of all the vocals and it would
Could be, yeah.
It would be one of those two, but I think it's Thriller.
Right.
It's Thriller.
I think it's Thriller.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe guys, we take 2 or 3 more questions from you guys, and then we'll wrap this up. Do you guys have anything extra you want to ask? Maybe about Michael. Do you guys have another thing that you guys want to talk about Michael? Maybe another personal experience.
Yeah. I mean, we've spent time.
I
We
remember-
spent time with him alone outside of the studio, so we both have a numerous. But Anthony,
Well,
you
you
go.
have more.
You
I
go.
mean, I'll tell a really fast one. I just remember he was supposed to be showing up at, like in the afternoon, and what I was told is he wanted to drive himself. He wanted to drive because
Oh my God.
he was being driven to the studio most of the time. So he drove, and then he got a flat tire on the 101, and no one knew where he was, and people were panicking. Because I remember at one point, wasn't there a guy named Joe that was like the double?
I don't remember.
There was a double though.
Yeah.
I remember.
I never met him.
Uh-huh.
I never.
Well, you would know.
Yeah, I never met Joe.
Well, I don't know if that was actually his name,
Oh yeah.
or
no,
that
I
Michael
never,
was called Joe.
It would for me. It would be more of Michael playing. He liked
Yeah.
to play. He liked to do pranks. He was a big prankster. So I don't. I remember that day though. We were nervous as heck.
Everyone was
because
really
we couldn't.
nervous.
We didn't know. And in those days, there were very few. We had the big mounted phones in the car, and Michael had a black Rolls, and he had a mounted phone. Quincy, we had a mounted phone, and there were certain people that had those phones, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
But we were nervous because I know he always wanted to drive more than he was allowed to. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he wanted to do stuff.
Yeah, he wanted to feel normal. I mean, he wanted to go to the store, walk around, and not have to deal with.
Yeah, he couldn't just leave. Like that time they went to the Beverly Center was an anomaly, but he had
Yeah,
to
I mean,
kind
we
of-
literally were sprinting. Thank goodness, there was like 20 girls chasing us.
Somebody else is asking if there's any more tidbits you have about Michael's recording process. I mean, I know we kind of went over it already, but there's a couple
there's
questions
a lot
about
to
it.
it.
Yeah,
Well, the fact that he made all those sounds, and then Bruce he just kind of, instead of being an engineer that was going to say like, we can't have those sounds.
yeah.
I mean, he used that SM7 mic, right?
That's the mic he recorded everything on?
I don't know if he did everything,
I don't know
but
if he did
a
everything,
lot.
yeah.
And
The
it's-
SM7B?
I think so, and it's a very
With the
directional.
cloud lifter thing.
Very
But it's
directional.
directional. So this
Yeah.
way, there could be that stuff going on,
Mm-hmm.
but it wouldn't be like really prominent.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he put him on like wood,
Mm-hmm.
so he wasn't trying to like just get it soaked up into the carpet, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that recording process allowed for him to snap his fingers and move around like more than
More than a normal singer would.
oh
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because he couldn't. It wasn't a matter of he wouldn't stay still. He wasn't one of those singers that would come up to the mic and just sing his vocal part. And you can feel that in the rhythm of when he's singing.
Yeah,
on
you
these-
can
on
actually.
these songs because he's moving. He's actually dancing. I mean, and the magical thing about him doing that. Back to you, what someone was asking about a moment is I still get chills to this day on two songs in particular, Billie Jean and Human Nature. One because in my memory, Human Nature was done. He sang that down in one take, really late at night, and there was a section in the song that there was a possibility they were going to do something different. Is what had been discussed in my memory. But Michael, they let Quincy go ahead and do the vocal, and it was on a night we were about to leave because it was late, and Michael had laid down and was kind of resting. So we were going to leave, and he looked at Quincy. I remember something. Him looked at Quincy and Rod and said, "No, I need to sing this song now," and I get emotional thinking about it now. And he got up and went out into the room, and he said, now's the time for me to sing this song. And he did it. And when you can feel him spiritually connect to those words and that melody, and it's just I'll never forget it. I'll never experience. We will never experience anything.
I mean, I wasn't
like
there
what we.
The live
You
recording
were
of
there.
that.
But I mean,
Yeah.
just the whole recording process, the whole time we spent working on this,
Yeah.
being as I like to say, being blessed enough, lucky enough, and
tell
and
that
fortunate
other part.
fortunate enough to be in that room.
Oh yeah, I mean I can't let all that go. 100% to all that. There was just another part to that story though where he did it, like you said, he did it in one pass, but then that section that they didn't know what to do with, Didn't he just start?
Yeah, he created vocally. He did something, and when it was done, and then at the end, you know, he's going. I mean, literally, my hair stands up now, and we got up and we were holding hands like, oh my goodness, what just happened?
Because they just let him go, and they're like, "Don't stop the tape.
Don't stop the tape. Just let him go." And you know, he's laughing after, and we were just.
You're like,
It was a very emotional moment, and it was.
You can't forget it.
I can't forget it. No.
okay, Crane Technique asked, I heard Billie Jean was mixed tons of times before the final mix. Was there some stressful mixing during the track? I guess he means maybe was there mixing going along during the tracking?
There was like, I know what he's getting at. I think they were under duress trying to get the first mix done for the album, and then they had to remix it because this is what Matt said.
Mm-hmm.
They were just too stressed out, and they had to take a break. They had like a 3-day weekend because they did a listening back party, and the mixes weren't up right. So he's right on.
He's right on about that. That was a really surreal moment. There was a party
At the end of all that.
People in the
They didn't
studio,
like it.
People in the studio. People bought I think remember Janet Jackson bought balloons, and LaToya and family members and other friends, and Freddie DeMann and Ron Weiser, the managers of Michael at the time, and we were all in, people from CBS, and it was just, they were all out in the room, and we were in the recording behind the console, and they're all out, and they're playing it back through the, and we all were looking at each other, and Quincy and Ron were looking at Bruce, and Bruce put his head down, and he goes, oh boy. And it was like in that moment they realized that they had to. We can't put this out because everyone was, those guys, they were burnt because of having to do, those long hours on the record, but also in the middle of that having to do the E.T. Storybook album.
Yeah.
And that just everyone, you're talking about working 12, 13, 14-hour days.
Right.
And so to Anthony's point, they then had to go back in.
Well, sometimes it's a really different, not always, but a lot of times it can be a really different mindset to mix something. So they were in this mode of not sleeping enough, but they could do that because it was like a rhythm and a pulse of getting through the production and getting the songs all right. But there was zero time to take a breath and reset, to get your head to be a listener now, or whatever it takes to be in mix mode. And I think that was the disconnect, and it really, they took the 3 days. Again, Quincy knew how to remedy it.
Yeah.
Someone asked earlier, was there any palate cleanser music you guys would listen to? But you're like, no, it was just go, 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 go.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
No.
Listening to the time.
Yeah.
And listening to Prince. I mean, Michael was listening to that all.
Yeah. He listened to everybody. I mean, he was, but
during the sessions, he would play
yeah.
those things and go, I like these sounds, I like this feel, what's going on there.
Yeah.
And that was usually late afternoon. He'd be on the turntable putting that stuff down. So I don't know if it was him getting other, inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. He was, and that's what great artists do. They know where to find the inspiration.
But he also told me once he liked Fred Astaire, and he goes, I just watched a Fred Astaire movie last night.
Yeah.
So he went home and told me that because he was inspired by whatever he saw,
And him and Fred Astaire, they were friends as well.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
that connection.
Yeah. He was friends with Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly, and of course Sammy Davis was a huge influence on him. And they were longtime friends.
So he was always the point to answer the question. He was getting it, and occasionally it would show up in the studio.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think this might be a fun question to end it on. I've heard this rumor too a lot. I hear Quincy and Bruce talk about the speaker actually catching on fire during Eddie Van Halen's solo in Beat It. How true is that?
I don't think so.
No? Untrue? I've actually heard this before, though. I've heard this for, a while.
I mean, the solo, I think there were punch-ins and it
Yeah.
wasn't like a...
Yeah. First of all, the solo wasn't played in that order. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah.
When did the solo come in? After?
No, he's saying it was edited. It was
Oh, gotcha.
a bunch
It was
of
edited.
takes.
There's a bunch of takes and the brilliance of...
How would you do comping?
And the brilliance...
Flying.
Flying. And cutting. back in those days.
Yeah.
Bruce,
That's how you cut it. Like
Bruce was a master cutter.
Yeah, they could transfer the 24 track to a 2-track of just a solo, and then cut it, and then they just fly that
Fly that.
that whole new piece.
so it's essentially what you do in Pro Tools, just
Except you
with
do
the ninth.
T sync.
Yeah.
This is just like, oh, that feels good.
Yeah,
So
but
you're there.
Yeah, and if you don't cut it right, you got to redo it again and
Interesting.
again and again and again. And Bruce was a master cutter and editor.
And flying it in. But I can't imagine Westlake like having a fire on the speakers.
I think.
I think they mean out of his amp though. Like if they
How
might
about
be.
it was a burning solo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
I think there's an exaggeration of what was happening. What came through was, when they were playing it back through the Orotone, that it sparked. It didn't spark, but it distorted, and maybe that's where that came from. But the brilliance of that solo, not only what he played, but the fact that Bruce, as an engineer, but also a person who had studied orchestration and composition, for him and Quincy to sit together, both having studied composition and orchestration, knew how to, from a flow standpoint and a compositional standpoint, have that solo be cut together like that and speak the way it does. I mean, the whole knock where he enters, that was actually the last thing he did.
Gotcha.
So they knew to say, "Oh,
Yeah.
here I am. I'm coming into the room, guys. I'm Eddie Van Halen."
That's a good point.
And that's
That's good.
That's just brilliant.
That was an afterthought, but they needed it to be in front,
right.
so they had like the dramatic shape. And the whole idea that it was even there. It's like sometimes it's not what something is; it's like where is it?
Where is it?
You could put a major triad in the middle of some really complex dissonant thing, and it's like it gets your attention because it does. It's like where is it? It doesn't belong there, and this was a unique thing to put that type of deal. But they did reconstruct it to. That's how Quincy's mind worked. In Human Nature, they added the guitar. That wasn't in the demo. They
No.
added like a funky, feel thing to the song.
Well, that was all Lukather. That was all Steve Lukather, the brilliant guitar player, session player that he is. Great member of the famous band Toto. I was actually sitting next to him when he did that in B. Humberto Gatica was the engineer for that, because Quincy and everyone was in another room, in room A, and Lukather, that part is just, he just started doing this, it's just brilliant.
Soulful electric guitar.
So just so.
Now isn't he a little bit in Beat It too?
Yeah.
He's on Beat It too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people were talking about that in the comments.
Yeah.
They were confused about which musicians played which part on which songs because there's so many credited guitarists and even just Beat It.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And once he'd layer the guitars on there.
And that's what he would do. He would get this person and say, "Oh, yeah, you try this," and get another session player and you try this, and then after everyone's done, you go, "Oh yeah, let's take a little bit of that and a little bit of that," and Quincy and Bruce, they would sit and Michael would sit and go, "Oh yeah, I like that, and
everything was so thought out, except the guitar part is kind of the one thing you can't really calculate.
right, you can't.
Go.
Everything, the strings, the brass, the synth parts are all the keys. Like we knew how to play it, and everything was like demoed by Rod. Even the drum beats were pretty much demoed,
Right.
and we'd recreate them. But like the guitar is just like it's a whole other animal. It's that guy's feel and that guy's idea that you just don't write it out and say, "Here, play this and strum up here and down here." And so they did a lot. I think the most experimenting.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they did. I mean, between what Paul did, David Williams, the amazing, God bless him, David Williams. We lost him too soon.
Billie Jean.
Billie Jean, So I mean, it just the guy was just, man. Yeah, he was really special.
Do you guys want to just say something to the stream real quickly?
Well, we're really happy that you can join us. We kind of like it as much as you do. We hope you like it.
Yeah.
But we've started just because of this project. Stephen and I have rekindled these experiences, right?
Yeah.
And it just being asked questions. It feels like it's resonating, and if there's a way that this can just kind of get out there into the universe and then get into your music, because that would be a great end result for me to just know that whatever we're saying, and through your questioning, that it can get back into the world, this kind of way of making music, and that it's relevant, of course, you know, and brings the joy to everybody. That would be a really good thing. So we're around. If any more rounds of this, reach out. Dante can check it out, and we could get into a lot of different aspects, of the process.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things I want to say that I've been thinking about this a lot. That diversity is this big term now, but Thriller was the epitome of diversity, of how humanity can come together. People from all different walks of life can come in a room with their craft, and all around the experience of supporting each other, empowering each other, and loving each other from different diverse backgrounds, religions, all of that, colors, and to create something as magical as Thriller. To Anthony's point, I'm excited to see this come back, this idea of this style of recording where you're not alone with your computer, where you engage with others and you respond to what they have to do and what they play. And I just think it's a beautiful, I'm hoping that all comes back.
Yeah, and it could come back in a new way, like
right.
Even if it's using screens or whatever. But someone said earlier about an alpha stage, it's just that higher level that Quincy was able to tap into of connectivity of people and styles and diversity, like Steven's mentioning, but that it could come together and find a new through line, and complete a narrative. So that can be employed in today, but it doesn't have to be the same way that it was done then, and that's, I try to do that now. We're not living in 1982 now.
Right.
There's just...
Dead.
You want to take the good stuff and figure out what happened there, and take a little bit of that with you when you can.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. We'll do this again soon.
Thank you.